Here's a fun fact about dying. Nobody warns you it's going to be loud. 2 seconds before I died, I was standing outside the Anchor, a dive bar 3 blocks from the gym where I coached, trying to pull a very drunk stranger off a bouncer twice his size. I'd like to say I died a hero. What actually happened is somebody I never saw swung a bottle at the back of my skull, and the last thing I remember is the curb coming up to meet my face faster than I could get my hands up to block it. No jumping, no bridges, no long goodbye notes, just bad luck, bad timing, and a bottle I never got to see coming. I want that on the record early, because where this story is headed, it matters. My name was Cole Bennett, 24 years old, assistant coach at Ironbound Boxing Club, 2 blocks off the Passaic River, in a part of Newark where the water smells like low tide even when the tide's not the problem. I'd spent my whole life throwing punches for a living or for free, and apparently the universe decided that wasn't quite enough punishment, because when I opened my eyes again, I was being choked against a cinder block wall by a stranger with a lit cigarette still smoldering between 2 fingers. "Host, are you even listening to me?" That voice was in my head. I'll get to that. The guy currently trying to collapse my windpipe had pale gray eyes, a split lip, and a face that belonged on the side of a poster warning teenagers about the dangers of poor life choices. Tall, sharp-jawed, bleeding from somewhere I couldn't see. Not one hair on his head matched the file currently unspooling itself inside my skull like a bad PowerPoint. "Congratulations, host. You have been linked with the Second Chances Redemption System. Your assignment, Ethan Whitfield. Height, 6'1". Face, conventionally excellent. Temperament. Temperament, my ass. I wheezed out loud, because at that exact moment Ethan Whitfield ground his knuckles harder into my throat and said, in a voice colder than the water under the Lincoln Park Bridge, "You've got 5 seconds to explain why you're breathing my air." Temperament, gentle and accommodating, the system finished, entirely unbothered. I have known some liars in my life. Bookies, ex-girlfriends. A parole officer named Gary, who swore up and down the halfway house had hot water. None of them held a candle to whoever wrote this kid's file. Old me, Cole, the boxer, the guy who once got suspended from a Golden Gloves qualifier for headbutting a referee's clipboard out of pure spite. Old me did not spend 2 hours being dead just to get strangled by a system's rounding error on day 1. I brought my knee up hard into Ethan Whitfield's stomach. He made a sound like a man who had never once in his life been hit, doubled over exactly the amount a normal person would, and I used the leverage to shove him backward, plant a hand on his shoulder, and drive my knee in again for good measure. He went down onto one knee behind the maintenance shed, breathing hard, glaring up at me through a curtain of dark hair like I'd personally insulted his ancestors. "Host, please, that is the male lead the entire narrative hinges on." "Host update," I said out loud, mostly to enjoy the look on Ethan Whitfield's face when he realized I was talking to a voice he couldn't hear. "Affection points, -infinity, my bad." A flashlight beam swept across the lot. Somewhere close by, a security guard's radio crackled. "Hey, you two, don't move." Ethan looked up at me, blood at the corner of his mouth, and for 1/2 second, something almost like respect flickered across that ruined, gorgeous face before it slammed shut again. "This isn't over," he said. "Cool, put it on my tab." I turned and ran, because apparently some things carry over from your old life even after you die, and mine were, throw a good knee strike, and never stick around to explain yourself to a man with a flashlight. Quick pit stop before this gets any weirder. If this is your first time here, welcome. Stories like this one go up regularly, and trust me, day 1 of Dean Ashford's second life is the calmest thing that happens to him all year. If sticking around for the rest of the disaster sounds like your kind of Tuesday, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. It costs nothing, takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps a story like this one find more readers. Okay, back to the mess. I didn't get the full rundown until I was 3 blocks away, hunched behind a dumpster outside a shuttered laundromat on Ferry Street, trying to convince my lungs that this body, whatever it was, could in fact still breathe. Explanation requested by host. You have been selected to enter the narrative Iron and Ivy, a serialized web novel with an estimated readership of 400,000. Your current identity is Dean Ashford, a minor antagonist scheduled to be expelled in Chapter 6 and never mentioned again. Your objective is to raise the male lead's favorability toward you to 100, thereby completing his character arc and earning your reward. And if I don't, then you continue living as Dean Ashford in Newark, New Jersey, indefinitely, host. I sat with that for a second. 2 hours ago, I had been Cole Bennett, 24, single, renting a room above a laundromat that was, I noted, glancing up. Apparently a different laundromat than the one I was currently hiding behind. Now I was Dean Ashford, 19, apparently notorious enough that a security guard recognized my face on sight, and the guy I was supposed to fall in love with had just tried to crush my larynx as a getting-to-know-you exercise. So my only way out of this is falling for Cigarette Boy back there. The system does not appreciate that nickname. The system, I said, can file a complaint. I want to be upfront about something before this story gets any further. I did not, in fact, want out because I was looking to disappear. I want that on the record. I'd thrown one really bad punch at fate and gotten unlucky, that's all. No dramatic exits. No jumping off anything. Nothing like that. What I wanted, in the 2 days after I woke up as Dean Ashford, was simple. I wanted my system to leave me the hell alone, my old gym back, my old life back, and possibly a large coffee, because apparently even in the afterlife, nobody serves coffee before 9 a.m. What I got instead was a studio apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up on Van Buren Street, with a busted stairwell light, a fridge that hummed like it was actively dying, and a folder of memories the system dumped into my head that told me Dean Ashford's mother had left for Florida 2 years ago and never called, that Dean Ashford had been held back a grade twice, and that Dean Ashford, like a solid chunk of Newark's 19 and 20-year-olds who never finished high school the normal way, was 3 weeks into his first semester at the ironbound Second Chance Academy, a diploma program on Union Street that took anybody willing to show up. No questions asked about the years in between. I spent 2 full days lying on that mattress, refusing to move, on principle, just to see who'd blink first. It's not laziness if it's a hunger sprite. Old habits, apparently, follow you across the veil. Cole had never been what anyone would call a morning person, and 19-year-old Dean Ashford turned out to share the exact same allergy to alarm clocks, which felt less like character development and more like a cruel cosmic joke at my expense. The system blinked first. Host, we are currently running a limited-time engagement bonus. Raise Ethan Whitfield's favorability by 10 points and receive a free item from the Wish Vault. I sat up so fast I nearly concussed myself on the ceiling fan. Keep talking. The Wish Vault contains several thousand items ranging from minor conveniences to life-altering rewards, unlocked according to favorability milestones. Fine. A washing machine that didn't eat quarters would already be a life-altering reward at this point. If the price of admission was making nice with a guy who could bench press my old resentments, I could work with that. I'd talked down worse people than a rich kid with a chip on his shoulder. I used to run a boxing gym full of them. Ironbound Second Chance Academy occupied the top 2 floors of an old furniture warehouse near the train tracks, retrofitted with the kind of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look faintly ill. Half the student body had aged out of regular high school before they could graduate. The other half had been asked, politely or otherwise, to leave. Locals just called it the Academy, though I'd heard at least one kid call it something less flattering on the walk-in. My seat was in the back row. At a desk, somebody had carved "Tyler was here" into, with what looked like a compass point. I sat down without much ceremony, ready to nap through whatever came next, because if there was one thing 19 years of Dean Ashford's memories and 24 years of Cole Bennett's habits agreed on, it was that a good nap solved at least 60% of life's problems. A chair leg kicked the underside of my desk hard enough to rattle it before I got the chance to test that theory. New kid, you know whose seat that is? I looked up. 3 of them in the loose, performative slouch of guys who'd rehearsed intimidating in a mirror. The one in front, buzzed hair, gold chain, a face I half recognized from a suspension notice pinned to the front office corkboard, leaned in like he was trying to make a point stick. "That desk's cursed," he said. Last guy who sat there got walked out by security for putting a sub-teacher's car through a fence. Before him, a girl got expelled mid-semester for a fight in the parking lot nobody ever explained. You new here, or you just don't care whose chair you're sitting in. Introducing Tyler Briggs, 19. Repeated junior year twice, self-appointed king of the back 3 rows, allergic to being ignored. Neat. Thanks, system. I didn't answer. Tyler didn't love that. He kicked the desk again, harder, said something about me being deaf, grabbed a fistful of my collar, and stalled out completely the second he registered. I had about 4 inches and 40 pounds of muscle on him that he had apparently not accounted for in his mirror rehearsals. Old me, Cole, had broken up worse fights for free on a Tuesday. I didn't even have to try. I just tilted my head, unbothered, and said, "You want to let go of the shirt before this gets embarrassing for you specifically?" That's when the side door banged open, and every kid in a 15-foot radius suddenly found something fascinating to look at on their desks. Ethan Whitfield walked in like the building owed him rent. Same split lip from 2 days ago, mostly healed now, a bruise fading along his jaw that I was uncomfortably aware I'd put there. His eyes swept the room once, landed on Tyler's crew, then on me, and something in his expression went very still. "A bunch of idiots," he said, to no one, and kept walking. Tyler's whole face lit up with the kind of malicious glee reserved for people who've just found a new target. Well, if it isn't Ironbound's own golden boy. He raised his voice, playing to the room now. "How's the family, Whitfield? Your dad's still telling reporters you're going to be the youngest state senator in New Jersey history, or did he finally notice you're stuck at the academy with the rest of us rejects?" I watched the muscle in Ethan's jaw tighten, watched him decide, very deliberately, not to answer that. He walked past all 3 of them without breaking stride and dropped into a seat 2 rows up from mine, spine straight, jaw set, staring dead ahead at a whiteboard nobody had bothered to erase since last Thursday. "Host," the system offered, "this represents an opportunity to intervene on the male lead's behalf, generating favorability." "I'm aware," I muttered, and got up. I didn't say anything clever. I didn't need to. I just walked past Tyler's desk, accidentally, caught the strap of his backpack with my ankle, and watched the entire thing, energy drink cans, a half-eaten protein bar, somebody's confiscated vape pen, go skidding across the linoleum in front of the whole room. Tyler scrambled after it, red-faced, while his 2 friends suddenly discovered they had somewhere very important to be. I didn't look at Ethan when I sat back down. I could feel him looking at me, though, a long, assessing stare, like he was trying to work out what my angle was. Favorability +3, host. Not bad for a Tuesday. I found out later, from Miss Okafor of all people, that Tyler had once been the kind of kid who actually tried. 3rd in his class, before his father lost the house on Elm and everything, after that, turned into a long, slow slide nobody at the academy had the resources to catch. It didn't make the backpack stunt feel like a mistake, exactly. It just made it feel less like a victory, and more like something I didn't need to gloat about twice. Miss Okafor ran the academy's makeshift library like a woman who had personally seen every excuse in the book and found all of them wanting, and she had a habit of dispensing exactly this kind of unsolicited context in the middle of unrelated conversations, usually right when you least expected it and could do nothing but sit there and absorb it. "You're new," she told me the first week, not looking up from the returns cart. "New kids either burn this place down or they don't. I've been doing this 11 years. I can usually tell by week 2 which one you're going to be. Which one am I? Ask me in a month." She still hadn't looked up. "Sit anywhere but the front row. The heater only works back there." I liked her immediately, in the specific, wary way you like someone who clearly isn't interested in liking you back until you've earned it. It took another 3 weeks before she'd let me check out anything, without personally inspecting the spine for damage first, and another 2 after that before she stopped pretending she hadn't noticed me sneaking dumplings tuna cans out of the staff fridge on cold mornings. Some people show they've decided to trust you by saying so. Miss Okafor showed it by simply stopping the inspections, quietly, without ever mentioning it, which suited both of us fine. Tyler Briggs did not, as it turned out, take being publicly embarrassed by a backpack particularly well. He spent the better part of a week finding small, petty ways to get even, snide comments in the hallway, a rumor about me that made it exactly nowhere because nobody at the academy cared enough to spread it, a deliberately spilled soda near my sneakers in the cafeteria that missed by a foot because Tyler's aim, like most things about Tyler, was mediocre at best. I let it go for 3 days out of what I told myself was maturity and was actually just boredom. A full 72 hours of watching Tyler orbit me like a wasp. I couldn't be bothered to swat, mostly because swatting things required getting off the radiator I'd claimed as my new favorite napping spot by the 3rd day. Then Tyler made the mistake of doing his little routine in front of Ethan again. Some comment about the academy being full of Whitfield's little charity cases now, and I decided maturity and the radiator could both wait. I didn't hit him. I'd promised myself, 3 months into this new body, that whatever else changed, I wasn't going back to solving every problem with my fists. Not because Ethan asked me to, though he had quietly, once, but because some stubborn, still healing part of Cole Bennett wanted to prove he could be something other than the guy who got suspended for headbutting a clipboard. What I did instead was worse, in the specific way only a plan cooked up with the loudest guy at the academy could be worse. That loudest guy had a name. I heard it for the first time that same afternoon, shouted across the courtyard by 3 different people at once, none of whom seemed to actually mean it. Marcus Reyes, though nobody had called him that since middle school. Everyone just called him Vinny, for reasons nobody, including Marcus himself, could fully explain when pressed. 19, same as the rest of us, built like a linebacker who'd decided comedy suited him better than football, and working nights stocking shelves at a food town on Ferry Street to help his mom cover rent. Vinny had the kind of loud, easy charm that made him impossible to dislike even when he was actively getting you into trouble, which, once I got to know him, turned out to be most of the time. He introduced himself to me by lobbing a half-eaten empanada across 2 lunch tables, missing my head by an inch, and hollering, "New guy, you throw hands or you throw excuses?" It was, in retrospect, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Vinny, it turned out, had a cousin who worked at a party supply warehouse on Frellinghuisen Avenue with an entire back room of unclaimed inflatable pool toys. And between the 2 of us, a Saturday afternoon, and roughly $40 in bungee cords, Tyler Briggs arrived at school Monday morning to find his beloved cherry-red Honda Civic, a car he'd been restoring for a year and talked about more than any human being should talk about a car, entirely mummified in pink flamingo floats, a hand-lettered sign taped to the windshield reading prophecy of the official iron-bound Academy Pool Party Committee. Inquire within. The whole school turned out to watch him try to peel a 6-foot inflatable flamingo off his side mirror while somebody's phone captured the entire thing for posterity. Tyler never proved it was us. He suspected, loudly, repeatedly, with increasing paranoia over the following weeks. But suspecting isn't proving, and Vinny and I had airtight, if extremely detailed, alibis involving a Foodtown inventory shift that a manager was happy to confirm. Ethan found out 3 days later, purely by deduction, cornering me by the vending machines with an expression that was somehow both deeply unimpressed and fighting a smile. "You didn't. I have no idea what you're referring to. Dean, there is a photo circulating of Tyler Briggs's car covered in pool flamingos, and you've been suspiciously smug for 4 days. Coincidence?" He studied me a long moment, arms crossed, and then, quietly, like it cost him something to admit it, said, "Thank you for not just hitting him. I know that would have been easier for you." "Yeah, well," I shrugged, suddenly, finding the vending machine snack selection very interesting. Figured I'd try being an adult about it. Turns out revenge is a lot more fun when nobody has to go to the emergency room. Favorability +4, host. The system approves of this de-escalation strategy. Please continue. I told it silently to mind its business, which by that point had become something like a private joke between us. I clocked the second thing about Ethan Whitfield 3 days after that, and it had nothing to do with points. I'd stayed late finishing a makeup assignment in the library, a converted storage closet with 4 tables, and a librarian named Miss Okafor who ran the place like a marine, and I came out the back stairwell to find Ethan sitting alone on the loading dock, phone pressed to his ear, back rigid, staring at nothing. "Yes, sir," he was saying, in a voice I hadn't heard from him yet. Smaller, careful, the kind of voice you use when you're trying very hard not to say the wrong thing to someone who's already decided you will. "No, sir, I understand. I'll have the internship application resubmitted by Friday. No, I haven't told anyone about the academy. No one at the campaign office knows. Yes, sir, I understand it reflects on you." Silence. Then, quieter, "I know what I cost you." He hung up before I could hear anything else, sat there another minute with his head tipped back against the loading dock cinderblock wall, and pressed the heel of one hand hard against his eyes, once, fast, like he was furious at himself for even needing to. I ducked back inside before he could see me. Didn't say a word to the system. Didn't need points for it. I just stood there in the stairwell a minute, feeling something shift in my chest that had nothing to do with any mission. Old me had grown up around guys who talked like drill sergeants to their own kids. I knew what that sounded like from the outside. I hadn't expected to hear it from a rich senator's son with a corner office waiting for him at 18. "Host," the system said, unusually quiet. "Your vitals indicate an emotional response." "Mind your business," I said and went home. Whatever Newark's coastline lacked in postcard charm, it made up for with stray cats, and one of them adopted me sometime around week 2. A scrawny gray thing with a torn ear that I found hiding under a dumpster behind the academy, soaked from an afternoon storm. I named her Dumpling because she was round in the middle and looked personally offended by everything, and I started sneaking her cans of tuna out of the cafeteria until she followed me home on principle. In hindsight, adopting a cat when I could barely convince myself to get off the couch most mornings was probably a bad life decision. But Dumpling didn't seem to care that her new landlord's primary skill set was napping and holding grudges, so we made it work. Ethan found out about Dumpling before I found out he had a genuine, functioning sense of humor buried somewhere under all that ice. It happened because Dumpling, in her infinite feline wisdom, decided the best place in Newark to nap was directly on top of Ethan Whitfield's backpack, in the middle of the academy courtyard, during lunch, in front of God and Tyler Briggs and everybody. Ethan stood over his own bag for a full 30 seconds, visibly at war with himself, before crouching down to very carefully scratch behind her one good ear. "She likes you," I said, walking up with my hands in my pockets, mostly to see what he'd do. "She's sitting on my calculus notes. She's got taste." The corner of his mouth twitched, actually twitched, like a smile trying to get airport security, before he caught himself and smoothed it back into his usual glare. "Is this yours?" "She adopted me. I didn't have a say." "That tracks," he said, and there it was again, that almost smile, gone as fast as it came. He straightened up, brushed cat hair off his slacks with a precision that suggested he'd never once in his life owned a piece of clothing that wasn't dry clean only, and added, without quite meeting my eyes, "Feed her something better than gas station tuna. She's underweight." Then he walked off before I could say anything back, which I was starting to realize was just how Ethan Whitfield operated. Say something that mattered, then leave before anyone could make him talk about it further. Favorability +5, host. I stopped checking the running number somewhere around then and started checking in with myself instead. Whether I'd made him laugh yet, whether he'd looked tired that day, whether the loading dock phone calls were getting worse or better. That was a stupider question to be asking myself than any math the system could throw at me. I want to be clear that this was alarming. It was Vinny, actually, who talked me into asking Ethan out on something that could technically be called a date, on the grounds that, as he put it, around a mouthful of pastel de nata, "You two have been circling each other like sharks for a month, brother. Somebody's got to throw the first punch, and for once, I don't mean that literally." "I don't even want to get up," I told him, which was true. It was a Saturday. My couch had reached the exact temperature and shape of a decision I did not want to make, and asking a guy out required standing, showering, and having a plan, none of which sounded appealing. Vinny physically hauled me off the cushions by one ankle until I agreed, mostly to make him stop. I didn't call it a date when I asked. I called it getting out of Newark's 10 square feet of gray water for one afternoon, which was close enough to true, since Branchbrook Park's cherry trees had just come into bloom and half of Essex County seemed to be showing up to see it. Ethan said yes faster than I expected, which I noted and did not comment on, mostly because I was afraid if I pointed it out, he'd take it back out of pure reflexive stubbornness. We took the light rail up on a Sunday, after I'd spent a solid 20 minutes trying to talk myself out of getting off the couch a second time that week, a fact I will deny under oath if it ever comes up in front of Vinny. And the whole park turned out to be a riot of pale pink against a sky that had, for once, decided to be genuinely blue instead of the usual Newark shade of used dishwater. Ethan walked with his hands in his pockets, quiet in the particular way he got when he was somewhere he actually wanted to be, instead of somewhere his father's schedule had put him, and I found myself watching him more than the trees. "You're staring," he said, not looking at me, the corner of his mouth twitching. "The blossoms are nice. I'm not a blossom, Dean." "No," I agreed. "You're better lit." That got an actual laugh out of him. Short, surprised, like it had escaped before he could stop it, and something in my chest did a slow, warm flip that had nothing to do with any system or any mission at all. We ended up on a bench near the old Cherry Blossom Welcome Center, splitting a soft pretzel from a cart because Ethan, apparently, had never once in 19 years bought street food, a fact I found so personally offensive, I made him try 3 different toppings out of pure principle. Somewhere between the mustard and the confession, he told me, quietly, staring at the fountain instead of at me like it was easier that way, about the first time his father had caught him failing a class, back in 7th grade, and the 2 weeks of silent dinners that followed. About how gentle and accommodating had never once, in his entire life, been a description anyone applied to him except, apparently, whatever system had written my assignment file, which made us both laugh until we had to explain the joke wasn't really explainable outside my own head. "You're different than I expected," he said eventually, turning to look at me properly, cherry blossoms drifting past behind him like something out of a movie neither of us would ever admit to liking. "When you first showed up, I thought you were just another Tyler, somebody looking for a fight." "I was," I admitted, "for about 10 minutes. Then you turned out to be a lot more interesting than a fight." He didn't say anything to that. He didn't need to. The way his hand found mine on the bench between us, fingers lacing through mine slow and deliberate like he was giving me every chance in the world to pull away, said plenty on its own. I didn't pull away. I hadn't wanted to pull away from anything in a long time. We stayed on that bench long after the pretzel was gone, watching the light shift gold through the branches, and at some point a street musician set up near the fountain with a battered acoustic guitar and started working through a set of songs neither of us recognized, badly, with enormous enthusiasm. Ethan, to my genuine shock, tossed a 5 into the open guitar case on our way out and told the guy with a completely straight face that his rhythm was improving. It was the single most Ethan Whitfield thing I had witnessed to date. Quietly, specifically kind, and constitutionally incapable of admitting it out loud without wrapping it in something that sounded almost like an insult. "You're a soft touch," I told him, once we were far enough away that the musician couldn't hear. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You just tipped a guy $5 for butchering 3 separate love songs." "I tipped him for effort," Ethan said, with the particular dignity of a man who knew exactly how transparent he was being and had no intention of admitting it. "There's a difference. Favorability +8, host. For once, I didn't even mind it keeping score. Everything good I was learning comes with a shelf life you don't get to see the label on." Hours started ticking on a gray Wednesday, 3 weeks after the cherry blossoms, in the shape of a black sedan idling across from the academy that I noticed and dismissed as nothing, then noticed again Thursday, then a third time when it followed 2 blocks behind me and Ethan as we walked toward the train station after class. Ethan noticed it before I said a word. "Don't look at it," he said low, taking my arm without any of his usual hesitation and steering us both into a bodega. "Please." "Ethan." "His name is Leland Voss." Ethan's voice had gone flat, controlled, the way it went right before he shut a door on a subject entirely. "He works for the people trying to keep my father out of the primary. He's been photographing me for weeks, trying to find something he can use. A beat, or someone." I understood the shape of that sentence before he finished it. Ethan told me the rest of it in pieces over the next hour, sitting on overturned milk crates in the bodega's back storeroom, because neither of us wanted to risk stepping back outside. His father, Senator Grant Whitfield, was 6 months from a primary he was expected to lose to a younger, better-funded challenger backed by a real estate developer named Aldous Kane. And Kane, it turned out, played dirty in the specific, patient way that only very rich men with nothing left to lose in public opinion could afford to. Leland Voss worked for Kane's campaign in a capacity nobody put on a business card. His entire job, as far as Ethan understood it, was finding leverage. "My father built his whole platform on family values," Ethan said, voice flat, reciting it like a line he'd heard too many times to feel anything about anymore. "Traditional, reliable, a model household. If it got out that his only son was, that I was." He stopped, upped, jaw working. "Kane's people would use it, not because they care, because it's useful. That's not your fault, I know that." He didn't sound like he believed it. "Doesn't change what it costs." "What it could cost you, if Voss decides you're the easier target." "You think I'm scared off that easy?" I nudged his knee with mine, mostly to see if I could get a single ounce of the tension out of his shoulders. I've been choked out by you personally on day one and stuck around anyway. Bar's pretty low from here. Also, for what it's worth, I once got suspended from an amateur boxing match for headbutting a referee's clipboard. A guy in a gray overcoat does not rank particularly high on my list of things to be scared of this month. That got the ghost of a smile out of him, there and gone, before the weight of the conversation pulled his face back into something more serious. I think, Ethan said, finally looking at me, something raw and unguarded breaking through the careful mask he wore around everyone else, that I've spent my whole life being told love is a liability, that the people who mattered to me were leverage waiting to be found. I don't know how to stop being afraid of that just because I want to. I didn't have a clever answer for that one. I just reached over and took his hand right there on a couple of dusty milk crates surrounded by boxes of canned soup and held on until some of the tension went out of his shoulders. You think he's going to come after me? I think, Ethan said, jaw tight, staring at a shelf of canned soup like it had personally wronged him, that you should stop walking me home. No. Dean. I said no. I don't know where the certainty came from, honestly. Maybe it was old muscle memory from a gym full of kids I used to walk home myself, guys twice their weight, looking for trouble on the same corners. Maybe it was just that I'd spent 3 weeks watching this particular idiot flinch every time his phone lit up with his father's contact photo, and I was done letting him carry that alone, just because carrying things alone was the only strategy he'd ever been taught. You don't get to decide that unilaterally. That's not how this works. Also, for the record, if you're about to sit here and try to break up with me over canned soup, I want it on record that this is the least romantic breakup location in the history of Newark. I refuse to be dumped next to a shelf of off-brand minestrone. Have some respect. That startled a real laugh out of him, short, surprised, the kind he clearly hadn't meant to let escape, and some of the grim weight in the room finally cracked. I'm not breaking up with you, he said, wiping at his eyes with the heel of one hand, half laughing and half something else entirely. I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference. There isn't, actually, if the plan involves you disappearing on me. Try again. Ethan looked at me for a long moment, really looked, the kind of look that made the whole bodega go quiet around us, and something in his shoulders came down half an inch, like some part of him had been braced for me to leave and was recalibrating in real time to the fact that I hadn't. You're impossible, he said, which from Ethan Whitfield I was starting to understand meant something closer to thank you than either of us was ready to say out loud. We left through the back exit 20 minutes later, once the sedan had finally pulled away, and neither of us said much on the walk home. There wasn't much left to say. A man in a gray overcoat had just confirmed, without ever raising his voice, that whatever this was between us now had a cost attached, and both of us were about to find out how much either of us was willing to pay. I told Vinny about it the next day, in the vaguest terms I could manage, because keeping it entirely to myself felt like exactly the kind of thing that would eat me alive by Friday. Vinny, to his credit, didn't ask for details he clearly understood I couldn't give him. He just went quiet for a second, a genuinely rare occurrence, and said, "You want me walking with you two after school for a while? Nobody messes with anybody when there's 3 of us, and I'm built like a vending machine." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't even really a plan. But it was Vinny's version of showing up, and it made the next 2 weeks of watching every parked car a little more bearable than they would have been otherwise. Somewhere around week 8, the system decided I'd earned a preview of the Wish Vault, which I want to state for the record was one of the single most disappointing customer experiences of either of my lives. Current unlockable rewards include 1 parking spot guaranteed for life within city limits, 1 lifetime supply of off-brand cereal, and 1 coupon for 40% off at a dry cleaners that has since closed. That's it? That's the big reward menu? Higher favorability unlocks better rewards, host. Patience. I relayed this later to Ethan, mostly because I'd started telling him things about the system in vague, deniable terms he'd taken to calling your imaginary customer service rep, and he laughed so hard over the parking spot that he had to put his coffee down. A parking spot, he repeated. In Newark. That's what the universe is offering you for emotional growth. I'm holding out for the cereal, personally. A man's gotta have priorities. Also, I'm told the alternative is I have to actually put in effort and effort is a young man's game. You're 19. Exactly. Too young for effort. I read that somewhere. You're a romantic, he said, deadpan, and kissed the corner of my mouth like it was the most natural thing in the world by then, which, 3 months in, it mostly was. If there was one wrinkle in all that domestic ease, it came in the shape of Priya Anand, a junior at Ethan's old prep school before the scandal that got him quietly transferred to the academy, who showed up one Saturday at the coffee shop near Newark Penn Station, where Ethan sometimes tutored kids for extra cash, and made it very clear, very fast, that she remembered him fondly and had absolutely no idea a boyfriend had entered the picture. We both knew, by then, exactly what a slip like this could cost. Voss's sedan hadn't shown up again in the 2 weeks since the bodega, but neither of us had forgotten what it meant that it might. So when Priya slid into the seat across from Ethan with the easy confidence of someone who'd never once been told no, I watched him do the math in real time. Keep it quiet, the safe thing, the thing Voss and Kane and his father would all prefer. Or don't. Ethan Whitfield, she said. I heard you transferred somewhere. Interesting. How's life among the townies? I watched Ethan's jaw tighten in the particular way it used to when Tyler needled him, and felt something old and unhelpful flare up in my chest, the same instinct that used to get me suspended for butting things. I didn't act on it. I just walked over, set a second coffee down in front of Ethan without being asked, dropped into the seat beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world, and said, pleasantly, sorry, who's this? Priya's smile faltered by exactly 1 degree. An old friend. Ethan glanced at me first, just a beat, just long enough for me to understand he was asking, silently, whether I was ready for whatever came next. I nodded, once. If Voss wanted a fight, he could have one. I wasn't going to be the reason Ethan spent the rest of his life whispering. Dean, Ethan said, and the warmth in his voice when he said my name did more damage to Priya's composure than anything I could have said myself. My boyfriend. The silence that followed was, frankly, one of the more satisfying moments of my second life. Priya recovered fast, made some excuse about an appointment, and left with the kind of dignity that meant she'd absolutely be complaining about this to somebody within the hour. Once she was out the door, Ethan let out a breath and laced his fingers through mine under the table. Not loud, not a performance for the rest of the coffee shop, just quiet and certain, like something he wanted to be true whether or not anyone else noticed. You didn't have to do that, I said, though I was grinning too hard to sound convincing. Voss is still out there somewhere. I know. He shrugged, sipping his coffee, entirely too pleased with himself for a man who'd just handed his enemies a possible headline. Let him find something to use. Some things are worth being honest about. Even quietly, even with a price on it. Favorability +6, host. The system observes host is smiling in a way that suggests the mission has become somewhat personal. Mind your business, I told it, for what felt like the 100th time, and meant it a little less than usual. I texted Vinny the whole story on the walk home, mostly because keeping something that's satisfying to myself felt like a waste of a good story, and he responded with approximately 40 emojis, a voice memo I never actually listened to because it was 4 minutes long, and the single line, "Bro just made his boyfriend girl-proof in front of an audience." Legendary. I am framing this text. Which, honestly, was about the reaction I'd expected, and exactly the reaction I needed after 2 weeks of flinching at every black sedan that rolled past the academy. It came to a head on a Tuesday, which felt unfair, because Tuesdays were supposed to be my day off from disasters. I was alone at the loading dock after dark, waiting for a rideshare that was running late, when a man in a gray overcoat stepped out from behind the dumpsters with the kind of unhurried calm that meant he'd been waiting there a while. Dean Ashford. Leland Voss said my name like he was tasting it, testing whether it was worth the trouble. You've become quite the complication. You're going to want to work on your opening lines. That one needs a rewrite. He didn't smile. Senator Whitfield's boy has a spotless image to maintain heading into a primary his father can't afford to lose. An entanglement with a young man from this particular institution would make excellent copy for the wrong newspaper. I'm prepared to make this simple for everyone. Stop seeing him. Today. Or I make sure this institution and everyone in it becomes very, very interesting to the press. Old me would have laughed in his face and thrown the first punch out of spite. New me, Dean, with a system in his head and a boy he was very much not ready to admit he cared about. Took half a second too long deciding which version of himself to be, and that half second cost me. Voss's hand came out of his coat holding something I registered distantly, was a knife, moving toward me fast enough that I barely got a forearm up. I never found out if I would have been fast enough, because Ethan Whitfield hit Leland Voss from the side like a freight train. They went down together in a tangle, and I heard the sharp gasp of impact before I understood whose it was. By the time I got there, Voss was scrambling backward, and Ethan was on one knee, hand pressed hard to his own side, blood already dark through his shirt, breathing through his teeth. "You absolute idiot," I said, dropping down beside him, hands shaking as I pressed my palm over his to add pressure. "You could have called the cops. You could have done literally anything else." "I did call them," Ethan managed, and even bleeding on a loading dock, he sounded insufferably smug about it. 2 minutes ago. From my pocket. While you were busy getting yourself stabbed. I wasn't the one who got stabbed. Details, Ethan said, and somehow, impossibly, found it in him to sound annoyed about the technicality, even with a knife wound in his side, which was, even in the middle of the worst 5 minutes of my second life. So purely, infuriatingly him that I almost laughed out loud despite the blood soaking through my sleeve. "I want it noted," I said, voice cracking somewhere in the middle of the sentence, "that this is the second time you've bled on me in one relationship, and I am starting to think you do it on purpose for the sympathy. Next time," Ethan gritted out, "I'll let the sedan hit you instead. See how you like it. Romantic, truly. Sirens, distant, then closer." Voss made it about 40 feet before campus security tackled him into a row of recycling bins, which, small mercies. Vinny later informed me was recorded on somebody's phone and viewed 200,000 times by the following morning under the caption "Newark's Finest." I didn't care about any of that in the moment. I cared about the blood soaking through my hoodie sleeve where I'd wadded it against Ethan's side, and the way his eyes kept trying to close, and the sound of my own voice, cracked and furious and terrified all at once, telling him to stay awake, telling him he didn't get to do this, telling him, somewhere in there, I honestly don't remember the order, that I loved him, which was possibly the worst possible time to say it for the first time, and also possibly the only time I would have had the nerve. The ambulance ride took either 4 minutes or 4 years. I genuinely couldn't tell you which. One hand fisted in Ethan's jacket the entire way, while a paramedic half my age kept telling me, with the calm, practiced patience of somebody who did this every night, that I needed to sit back and let her work. I didn't sit back. Ethan, drifting in and out under the fluorescent strip lighting, found the energy at one point to tell the paramedic, with what I can only describe as pure, uncut Ethan Whitfield audacity, that I was always like this, and she should get used to it. She laughed. I did not at the time find any of it funny. "Favorability climbing fast, host," the system said, very quietly, like even it understood this wasn't the moment to celebrate. "Almost there." "Shut up," I told it, and held on. The knife had caught muscle, not anything vital. The doctor used the word lucky. So many times I started to resent it personally. And Ethan spent 3 days in a hospital bed at University Hospital being fussed over by nurses. A very stiff, very furious Senator Whitfield, who showed up exactly once and left after 40 minutes of hallway phone calls, and me, camped out in the world's least comfortable visitor chair, refusing to go home even when a nurse pointed out, not unkindly, that I looked like something that had crawled out of the Passaic. He didn't say much about his father's visit. I didn't push. Some doors, I was learning, you had to let a person open on their own schedule. Vinny showed up the second day with a duffel bag of contraband snacks, smuggled past the nurse's station, took one look at Ethan hooked up to a monitor, and burst into tears, so loud a nurse poked her head in to check nobody was dying twice in 1 week. "You absolute lunatic," Vinny said, hugging Ethan with the sort of enthusiasm that made the heart monitor spike, then rounding on me before Ethan could even respond. "And you. You let your boyfriend get stabbed protecting you, and you're just sitting there like it's a normal Tuesday." "I have cried exactly 4 times since it happened," I said. "You weren't there for any of them, which was the plan." He held my hand the entire ambulance ride and would not stop apologizing to me for bleeding on my hoodie. Ethan offered, with the particular smugness of a man who knew exactly how much that detail would wreck me in front of a witness. "That's private," I said. "It's romantic," Vinny corrected, wiping his eyes with the back of one hand, grinning now. It's disgustingly romantic, and I've never been prouder of either of you idiots in my life. Also, I brought you Portuguese custard tarts because hospital food is a war crime, don't tell the nurses. Ethan, propped against a mountain of pillows with an IV taped to the back of one hand, ate 2 custard tarts against explicit medical advice, argued with Vinny about whether flamingo-related vandalism constituted a felony in the state of New Jersey, and laughed, really laughed, unguarded, the sound filling up that small hospital room until it didn't feel like a hospital room at all anymore. Just 3 idiots who'd somehow found their way to each other in the worst possible city at the worst possible time, and made something good out of it anyway. I sat back and watched them argue, Ethan's fingers loosely laced through mine on top of the blanket, and thought, not for the first time, that whatever the system had promised me in that wish vault, if it could have topped this. A free parking spot didn't hold a candle to a hospital room full of bad jokes and stolen custard tarts, and I would have told the system exactly that if it had bothered to check in, which, for once, mercifully, it didn't. Miss Okafor sent flowers on day 3 with a card that read, in her precise, no-nonsense handwriting, "Heal fast." The library heater's still broken, and I need someone to complain to about it who isn't me. Ethan kept the card taped to the inside of his hospital tray table for the rest of the stay, which told me more about how much the academy had come to mean to him than any speech ever could have. What Ethan did do, the second he was cleared to go home, was announce, completely deadpan, the second we were alone in the cab, a kiss ban. Doctor's orders. No exertion until the stitches are out. The doctor did not say that. The doctor implied it very strongly. You're punishing me for getting you stabbed. I'm punishing you, Ethan said, turning to look out the window so I couldn't see whatever expression was doing something complicated to his face, for scaring me half to death, and then telling me you loved me while I was too busy bleeding to say it back properly. I intend to say it back properly. Later. When I'm not concussed on painkillers and you're not covered in my blood, I didn't have a comeback for that. I just reached over and laced my fingers through his, careful of the IV bruise on the back of his hand, and let the quiet sit there between us the rest of the ride, warm and a little unbearable, all the way home. The kiss ban held out for exactly 6 days, which I consider a personal victory, mostly because I was the one who broke it, pinning him carefully back against his own couch cushions one evening, mindful of the stitches, and kissing him slow and thorough until he stopped pretending to be annoyed about it, and started kissing back like he meant it, one hand fisted in the front of my shirt, the other careful against my jaw like I was something worth being gentle with. When we finally came up for air, he was breathing hard, staring up at me with an expression I'd never once seen on Ethan Whitfield's face in 3 months of knowing him. Open, unguarded, entirely undone. You're going to be the death of my recovery timeline, he said, which from anyone else would have sounded like a complaint, and from him sounded like the closest thing to "I adore you" he was capable of saying out loud on a Tuesday. Get used to it, I told him. Doctor's orders don't apply to the good stuff. Diploma results for the Academy's spring completion cohort posted online at 6 in the morning. On a day I will remember for the rest of whatever this second life turns out to be. I'd been dreading that alarm all week. Old habits die hard, and nothing about Dean Ashford had ever been a morning person. But I was awake before it even went off, phone already in hand, heart going like I was back in a ring waiting for the bell. I sat on Ethan's bed, staring at my phone screen for a full 2 seconds before the page loaded, convinced it had frozen, and then it hadn't, and there it was. Congratulations. Requirements met. Community college acceptance letter attached below it, Essex County College, Business Administration, start date in the fall. Ethan's phone buzzed half a second later, still lying face down on the nightstand between us. His own results. Sent the same morning, the same cohort, the same 6 a.m. Deadline neither of us had slept properly waiting for. He didn't reach for it right away. He was too busy watching my face. Is it real? I asked out loud. To nobody, to everybody, to a system that had gone conspicuously quiet for weeks. Tell me this is real. Ethan finally turned his phone over, read his own screen, and let out a long breath beside me, one I hadn't realized he'd been holding. Rutgers Newark, Political Science, full transfer credit from the Academy's advanced track. Is it real? I asked again, this time pointed straight at him. It's real. He sounded almost disbelieving saying it. like some part of him had built a whole future on the assumption none of this would actually happen for either of us. I tackled him sideways into the pillows without any regard for his healing stitches, whooping loud enough that his downstairs neighbor thumped the ceiling in protest. "Careful," Ethan said, laughing. Actually laughing, bright and unguarded, a sound I'd have paid the Wish Vault's entire catalog to hear more of. "Dean, you did it, we did it, both of us, at the same time, like a couple of overachievers." His face went soft in that particular way it only did around me now, careful and a little disbelieving, like some part of him still couldn't quite trust that I was staying. "There's a lot of road left," he said, reaching up to smooth my hair back from my face, like it mattered to him more than anything else in the room. "But we've got time for it now, as much of it as we want." "Host," the system said, so quietly I almost missed it, "have you forgotten your objective?" The juice box in my hand nearly went flying. Damn it, I hadn't heard from that thing since the loading dock. "Relax," I told it, silently this time, since Ethan was still looking at me, and I had zero interest in explaining out loud that I was arguing with an AI. "I'm not interested in the reward anymore. Whatever the exit fee is, take it out of me. I don't want out, I want to stay." The system was quiet for a second longer than usual. "Congratulations, host. Mission complete. The Second Chances redemption system exists to help lost people find their way back to living. We wish you a long and happy life." I laughed out loud at that, which made Ethan pull back to look at me with one raised eyebrow, silently asking what was so funny. "Nothing," I said, pulling him back down against my shoulder. Turns out the whole redemption thing wasn't really about you at all. One final matter, host," the system added, almost sheepish, if a customer service AI could manage sheepish. "Your Wish Vault balance has been converted into a single lump reward per program completion policy." A notification blinked across the inside of my skull, and I nearly choked on my own coffee reading it. Reward unlocked. 1. Fully funded 2-year scholarship to Essex County College, Business Administration track, tuition and materials covered in full. Ethan. My voice came out strange. "Ethan, I think I just got a scholarship." "From where?" I have no idea how to explain that without sounding insane. He studied me for a long second, the kind of look that meant he'd long since stopped needing every detail spelled out, content instead to just believe that good, strange, unexplainable things sometimes happen to people who'd earned them. And then he smiled, slow and real. "Then don't explain it. Just say thank you and take the win, Dean. You've earned enough of those." "You're welcome, host," the system said, quieter now, almost fond. "It has been a pleasure watching you learn how to live again. This account is now closed." And just like that, for the first time since I'd woken up choking on cigarette smoke and cinderblock dust behind a maintenance shed, the voice in my head went silent for good. Not with the hollow, ringing silence of something taken away, but the easy, unremarkable quiet of a job finished well. Dawn came up gray-gold over the Passaic that Saturday, the two of us sitting on the fire escape outside Ethan's apartment with 2 coffees from the bodega downstairs, dumpling curled between our feet in a patch of early sun. The water down there had never once, in 3 months, looked like anything but industrial gray. But that morning, with the light hitting it just right, it broke into 1,000 small glittering pieces, like somebody had finally decided the whole river deserved better. "What are you looking at?" Ethan asked, catching me staring. I turned back to him instead, dark hair still sleep-mussed, scar at the corner of his mouth from a fight I never wanted him to be in, eyes soft in a way they'd taken 3 months and 1 stab wound to learn how to be around me. "You," I said, "my boyfriend." He rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. The real one, the one he still hadn't figured out how to hide from me even when he tried, and the fog over the river kept burning off, slow and certain, until there wasn't any left at all. 3 years later, moving Ethan Whitfield's entire book collection out of a Rutgers Newark dorm room turned out to be more physically demanding than every boxing match I ever fought combined. "You have," I said, staggering under the 4th cardboard box in a row, "an unreasonable number of books about constitutional law for a guy who's majoring in political science and pre-law, and also apparently trying to personally destroy my spine." You offered to help. Ethan didn't even look up from the box he was labeling, infuriatingly composed in a gray t-shirt that should not have been allowed to look that good at 9 in the morning. "Nobody forced you. I was emotionally manipulated. There was a kiss involved. There's always a kiss involved. You have a weakness. He wasn't wrong, which was the most annoying part. 3 years since the academy, one associate's degree in business administration, and a part-time job managing the front desk at Ironbound Boxing Club. My old gym, under new ownership, which felt like its own small, private joke the universe had decided to let me in on. Later, I was splitting the lease on a one-bedroom 4 blocks from campus, with the same insufferable, brilliant, occasionally still terrifyingly cold-blooded man who'd once tried to choke me out behind a maintenance shed. And somehow it was the best decision either of us had ever made. I still napped through most Sunday mornings on principle. Some things about a man never change, second life or not. Vinny showed up an hour late with a U-Haul he'd definitely borrowed from his cousin without asking. Dumpling, fully grown now, twice as opinionated, permanently unimpressed with all of us, supervised the entire move from the top of a bookshelf, and somewhere around box 11, Ethan's mother called to ask, very carefully, whether she could come see the new place sometime, which was new. New in the good way. The way that made Ethan go quiet and pleased in the corner of the kitchen for 10 full minutes after he hung up. Senator Whitfield had not called. He hadn't, in fact, called since the hospital. That was a longer story, one we were both still working through in pieces, but Ethan didn't flinch reading his father's name in the news anymore. Didn't chase the internship his father once wanted, either, and had swapped it without a shred of regret for a summer clerkship at a civil rights nonprofit off Broad Street, which felt, to both of us, like enough progress for now. The senator lost the primary that November by a wider margin than anyone at Kane's campaign headquarters had bothered to predict, and Leland Voss's name never showed up in a gray overcoat outside either of our apartments again. Last box, Vinny announced, staggering in with something rattling suspiciously. This one's labeled Dean's stuff, do not question. I'm gonna need context. It's my old boxing gloves, I said, taking the box before Vinny could investigate further. Sentimental value. Uh-huh. Vinny set down the box he was carrying, wiped his forehead, and looked between the two of us with the particular smugness of a man who'd called this exact outcome 3 years ago over pastéis de nata. You know, back at the academy, if you'd told me the scariest guy in school and the guy who kneed him in the stomach on day 1 were going to end up shacked up in a one-bedroom with a cat, I would have said you were out of your mind. I was out of my mind, I said. Temporarily. It's cleared up since. Ethan, unpacking a box of mismatched mugs across the kitchen, didn't even turn around. He still talks in his sleep sometimes, argues with somebody who isn't there. Very concerning. I threw a dish towel at his head. He caught it without looking, which, after 3 years, I really should have expected that by now, and turned around just long enough to catch my eye and smile, small and real and entirely mine, before going back to the mugs like nothing had happened at all. Later that night, after Vinny had gone home and the last box had finally been unpacked, I found Ethan sitting on the fire escape with 2 mugs of coffee, exactly like our first morning together, except the mugs actually matched this time and Dumpling had claimed the good spot on the railing before either of us could. You ever think about it? I asked, settling in beside him, the city humming its usual gray, stubborn hum below us. How we got here. The whole mess of it. Constantly, Ethan admitted. Mostly I think about how you kneed me in the stomach approximately 4 minutes after we met, and somehow that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I've had 3 years to come up with a better story for how we started, for whenever my mother finally asks. I still haven't found one that doesn't involve a maintenance shed and a bruised kidney. Tell her the truth. She'll like me more for it. She already likes you more than she likes me most days. I don't need the help. In my defense, you were choking me. In my defense, I thought you were a threat to my carefully maintained reputation as an emotionally unavailable disaster. You're still an emotionally unavailable disaster. Slightly less of one, he allowed, bumping his shoulder against mine, thanks to you. He was quiet a moment, watching the last of the light fade gold over the water, and then, softer, in the voice he only ever used when it was just the two of us and nobody else in the world to overhear it. I used to think second chances were something other people got. Not people like me. Not people who'd already disappointed everyone who mattered. His hand found mine on the railing, steady now in a way it hadn't been that first gray dawn 3 years ago. Turns out I just needed the right person handing them out. I didn't have a clever line for that one. I didn't need one. I just leaned over, kissed him slow and unhurried on a fire escape 4 floors above a city that had somehow, against every possible odd, become home, and let the rest of the night take care of itself. Somewhere below us, a train rattled through on the light rail line, the same one that had carried us both to Branch Brook Park on a Sunday 3 years ago, when neither of us had any idea what we were walking into. Dumpling shifted on the railing, resettled against Ethan's knee, and let out the specific put-upon sigh of a cat who considered both of us mildly inconvenient but had decided, on balance, to keep us anyway. I understood the feeling completely. I'd made the exact same call about this ridiculous, brilliant, occasionally still terrifyingly cold-blooded man the day he tipped a busker $5 for butchering 3 love songs in a row, and I hadn't regretted it once since. Outside the kitchen window, 4 floors up, Newark kept doing exactly what Newark always did, loud gray, stubborn, alive, and for the first time since I'd woken up gasping in someone else's body behind a maintenance shed, none of that felt like something I needed rescuing from. It just felt like home. And that's the story. 2 broken bad boys, one very unhelpful system, and a city that turned out to be worth staying alive for. If you made it all the way here, thank you for sticking with Dean and Ethan through every flamingo, every hospital visit, and every terrible customer service exchange with a redemption system that couldn't tell a primary from a lifetime supply of off-brand cereal. Stories like this one go up regularly, and Dean Ashford is far from the last disaster case who finds his way home. So if you'd like to be there for the next one, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure it lands in front of you the moment it goes up. No pressure, just an open door. See you in the next one.